Hello, students, and welcome back to English Literature a Click Away. Before we start with today's poem, I would like to request you all to check the description box for my other videos about the importance of watching English videos for learning English literature and how it helps you with your examinations, and also about the important poems for MEG English. Today we are taking up the poem The Good Morrow, written by John Donne. It's a very interesting poem, and also it is very important as you might get RTCs from this poem in the examination. First, let's have a look at John Donne's life and his bio. John Donne was one of the early modernists and was born in 1572. He studied at Cambridge and Lincoln Inn. John Donne had seen many religious persecutions in his life, and hence he was of a rebellious nature. Although he got political patronage, he still suffered a lot of social and financial instability. He is regarded as the most influential metaphysical poet. What is metaphysical poetry? We'll come to that later. He died in 1631 due to stomach cancer. Now let's come to the term metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical is characterized by similarities between dissimilar things. There's a kind of paradox in the poem. The things which cannot be considered similar are compared to each other and are shown as similar. So it's basically similarity in unusual things. There is no fixed structure of the poem. That is, metaphysical poetry is free from traditional style. It does not follow the Elizabethan or other structures. There is a uniqueness in the poem, and there is profusion of conceit. That is, there are bizarre relations or comparisons of unusual things, as we said earlier. The imagery of a metaphysical poetry is too good to be existing. The theme mostly in the metaphysical poetry is platonic love. So these are the characters of the metaphysical poetry. Now we come to the poem itself, the poem Good Morrow. The poem is written in 3 stanzas, so we are going to discuss it one by one. The first stanza of the poem, The Good Morrow, goes like this. I wonder by my troth what thou and I did till we loved. Were we not weaned till then, but sucked on country pleasures childishly? Or snorted we in the 7 sleepers' den? 'Twas so, but this all pleasures fancies be. If ever any beauty I did see, which I desired and got, 'twas but a dream of thee. Now in this poem, the poet is addressing his lover and saying that I wonder. He's wondering what he and his lover did till they fell in love. What were they busy doing? I wonder by my troth, I wonder by my faith, why didn't we start loving earlier? What held us back? So he's wondering, were we not weaned till then? Now these first 2 lines are very important. Were we not weaned till then? Now weaning is a process when a baby is shifted from breastfeeds to top feeds. So he considers not being in love as being breastfed or being childish. He says, were we not weaned till then, but sucked on country pleasures childishly? He considers the country pleasures that they were busy in, and they were not loving at that time. They were not in love with each other and were enjoying the country pleasures. It seemed childish. All these things now appear childish to him. He thinks that they should have fallen in love earlier instead of enjoying the country pleasures. Or snorted we in the 7 sleepers' den. Now 7 sleepers' den is a Christian legend that goes like this, that there were 7 Christian children, Christian youth, who were persecuted for their faith during the reign of the Roman Emperor Decius. They fled to a cave and took shelter in the cave, and the Roman emperor walled the cave, and these 7 children slept there, it is said, for 200 years. So he assumes they have been sleeping like they have been sleeping in the seven sleepers' den for about 200 years. It's such a long period. He feels that not being in love was too long a period. Why were they not in love? 'Twas so, but this all pleasures fancies be. He says, maybe that was the reason, but let all the pleasures and fancies be alone. If ever any beauty I did see. Now he says that it is not that he has not seen any other girl other than his lover. He has not looked at anybody. I might have seen any other beauty other than you, which I desired and got. But it was just a dream of thee. That means she was just a dream of you. She was not even a part of you. So she was nothing like you. If I have desired a girl and got her before you came into my life, she was nothing like you. She was nothing compared to you. Coming to the next stanza. And now, good morrow to our waking souls, which watch not one another out of fear. For love, all love of other sides controls, and makes one little room and everywhere. Let sea discoverers to new worlds have gone. Let maps to other worlds on worlds have shown. Let us possess one world, each hath one and is one. Now this stanza has a mention of the metaphysical characteristic of enlightenment. We see the mention of sea discoverers, maps. So that was a period when traders had started moving out on voyages for discovering new lands. So in this stanza the poet says, he says, and now good morrow, good morning to our souls. So he has been saying in the previous stanza that we were asleep till now, that we were not in love with each other. So now our souls are awake, and good morning to our souls, now that we are in love. Which watch not one another. He says now we look at each other with love. It's like we are watching each other with love and not with the fear of losing each other or leaving each other. So we are not looking away from each other. We are looking at each other with love. And makes all love of other sides control. So the love is, he says the love is so intense that all other sides, all other pleasures that they have been distracted by are nothing now. Now all those sides are controlled and it is only focused on their love. And makes one little room and everywhere. So this one little room is, he is considering their love as a room. And that one small room is everywhere for them, for him and for his lover. Let sea discoverers to new worlds have gone. He says, let the sea discoverers or the traders who want to go to the new worlds, let them go. Let them refer the maps and find new worlds. Maybe they have found new worlds. But let us possess one world, each hath one and is one. But let us, you and me, each have one world, which is one world for us. So let us possess this one world. What is this world? That is their love for each other. So let us possess this world. We each have one love. That is his love for his lover and his lover's love for him. So make it one. Coming to the third stanza. My face in thine eye, thine in mine appears, and true plain hearts do in the faces rest. Where can we find two better hemispheres, without sharp north, without declining west? Whatever dies was not mixed equally. If our two loves be one, or thou and I, love so alike that none do slacken, none can die. Now again we find mention of enlightenment, findings of that period in this poem. See, we find the mention of hemispheres, the sharp north, declining west. So there is the character of enlightenment here. And as far as conceit, see, he is considering their love to a globe. His love and her love are two hemispheres. So we are so much in love with each other that my face in thine eye, like your eyes have my face and my eyes have your face. It seems that my eyes are full of your face. They are only looking at you, and your eyes are only looking at me. And our hearts are on each other's faces, and as we look at each other, true plain hearts do in the faces rest. Our hearts, that is our feelings, are resting on each other's faces. So next he says, we are like two equal hemispheres. The earth, till then it was known that earth is not flat and it was a sphere. So he says our love for each other is like two hemispheres, yours and mine. So it is not nothing like others' love. But although they are hemispheres, there is no sharp north without declining west. Like the two hemispheres make a globe. So there is a north in one and a west in the other. He says our hemispheres are completely alike. There's no difference in the hemispheres. Sharp north and declining west can also be seen as sharp north is the cold London, the winters of London that are chilling, and the declining west is the sunsets. So these two situations are looked at as glooming situations. So in our love, in our hemispheres, there is no sharp north and no declining west. Next he says that now whatever dies was not mixed equally. We can also find a hint of mathematics. It has been depicted as an equation that whatever dies was not mixed equally. If our two loves be one, but thou and I love so alike that none do slacken, none can die. So even if one of us is taken out of the equation of love, our love for each other is so much alike that it will remain even after death. We will love each other even after death, and or any one of us dies, and the equation will remain the same. We will keep loving each other. The balance will be the same. So this is how he is explaining the intensity of love towards his lover. And we have seen a lot of metaphysical characteristics in the poem. We find the far-fetched imagery and the conceits and the unusual comparisons, like love is compared to hemispheres and love being compared to an equation. And also we don't see any fixed pattern here. We have only 3 stanzas, and the theme is of course the love, purest form of love that has been described in the poem The Good Morrow. The important RTC that you might expect from this poem would be the first 2 lines. I wonder by my troth what thou and I did till we laughed, were we not weaned till then, but sucked on country pleasures childishly. So these 2 lines are important. Also another one, and now good morrow to our waking souls, which watch not one another out of fear. So that was the poem The Good Morrow by John Donne. A very interesting and small poem. Please do share, like and subscribe, and do comment if there are any further doubts about the poem. Thank you.